Hi everyone, welcome to this session, Why is Climate Action Essential for Competitive Advantage? And first of all, thanks very much for joining us. Congratulations on finding the room. We didn't make it easy for you, so you've all passed. So I'd just like to say a couple of words first. We started talking about climate as the GSMA probably back in 2019. So we're sort of in our 5th year. Obviously, it's been a topic for a lot longer than that. But in terms of what we're doing at an industry level, back in 2019, there was an ambition that was set by the board of the GSMA to look to move the industry to net zero by 2050 at the latest. So we're going to hear today how we're doing against that ambition. And there's some good news. I won't make any spoilers because that's for George to present. But there's some good news around that. And then we'll dive into actually how this is being enacted across the industry. So we've got a great discussion that we're going to have with ZTE on the climate action that they're taking. They've made a big step forward over the last year. And then we've got a really great panel of speakers from really around the world looking at actually how climate action is being achieved across lots of networks, up and down the supply chain as well, to hit these, we've got this long-term target to be net zero by 2050, but that is quite a long-term ambition, and hopefully we'll meet that ambition actually before 2050. But there's lots more that we need to do by 2030, and that will be, I think, a particular focus of our discussion today as well. So first of all, we have, is it this one? I'm probably going to press the wrong button. Is it that one? Thank you very much. First of all, we have a video for you.
"2023 was the hottest year on record. In a world where the urgency of climate change grows more apparent by the year, the mobile industry is redoubling its efforts. 70 operators, covering almost half of mobile connections, have committed to near-term science-based climate targets, a testament to the industry's collective dedication to climate action. Despite the ever-increasing demand for connectivity and data, operator emissions have fallen in most regions. This underscores the industry's commitment to reducing its environmental impact while meeting the needs of customers. From renewable energy installations to eco-friendly practices, from recycling initiatives to carbon reduction strategies, the mobile industry is leading the charge towards net zero. Yet, challenges remain. An incredible 5 billion mobiles are lying dormant around the world, but with 15 leading operators committed to 2030 targets to increase circularity, we're aiming to collect more of these phones back in, to help reuse, refurbish and recycle. In some parts of the world, there's more that can be done, but we are making progress. Collaboration is the linchpin of success. Our dedicated climate action task force now stands at over 65 members in leading positions around the globe and is doing essential work to move the needle. As we confront the challenges ahead, greater cooperation between the public and private sector and international organizations will lead to the systemic change required. We draw strength from our collective efforts and the progress we've already made. Together, we can continue to lead the charge towards mobile net zero. To find out how the industry is doing towards the net zero ambition, download the State of the Industry on Climate Action report at gsma.com/climate.
Great, so that was just a little taster of some of the highlights of the report. But to talk through in a bit more detail, George, would you like to step up? Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Stephen. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Looks like we have a full house. Really, it's my pleasure to present this report for the first time today. We've just launched it today. So as Stephen mentioned, in 2019, the industry set an ambition to reach net zero by 2050. We've done these analyses every year, so this is the 4th annual assessment tracking progress of how we're doing towards those net zero goals. So the report has 3 key questions that we're looking to answer. First is, how is the mobile industry progressing towards these goals? Is the sector on track with net zero targets, both for the near-term targets in 2030 and then longer term towards 2050? And which regions are leading the charge? How can we learn those lessons and apply them globally? So the GSMA Climate Action Task Force was brought together in 2019 as a platform for collaboration and sharing to accelerate progress across the industry. We've grown rapidly over the past 3 years. We now have 66 members across the world. And one of the first areas we focused on as part of this task force was helping to support our members in setting climate targets. And we've seen growing momentum from operators proactively committing to climate targets. Over the past year, we've seen 8 mobile operators commit to near-term science-based targets, bringing the total to 70. This represents about half of mobile connections globally and about 2/3 of revenue. An additional 50 operators have also committed to net zero climate targets as well. Another bright spot is that more operators are disclosing climate data, and also the quality of their disclosures is also improving. So you can see in the chart that 70 operators disclosed in 2023 to the CDP, and a record 19 received an A score. And this is quite exceptional given only 350 companies globally got an A score on climate. So more than a quarter of mobile operators that disclosed to CDP got an A, compared with about 1.5% of all companies globally. A big challenge that we see with operators is around disclosing Scope 3 emissions. This is a big challenge both for data quality, data access, and we've worked with our members to improve the quality of these disclosures. So working with the ITU, GESI, and our operators, we developed a new guidance to help support operators to disclose Scope 3 emissions. And we're happy to report that more operators did disclose on Scope 3 categories in 2023, with 2/3 reporting on 10 or more categories out of the 15. So the next question is, how is this increased ambition and disclosure translated into results? So we looked at all the data coming from CDP and other climate disclosures. And the good news is that globally, mobile operator emissions have actually fallen since 2019. So they're down 6% between 2019 and 2022. And this is in spite of surging demand for data and connectivity. You can see in the graph here, data traffic more than doubled over this period. The number of mobile connections was up 7%. And regionally, we see Europe leading the way with a remarkable 50% reduction over just 3 years. North America, Latin America, and the MENA region also had reductions of 20 to 30%. And the main drivers of this progress in these regions is really energy efficiency and renewable energy progress. So in fact, looking at the last year of data, we can see that energy efficiency, electrification of fleets, generators, and then renewable energy have contributed about 80% of the reductions that we saw over the most recent year. Globally, operators used around 300 billion kilowatt hours of electricity in 2022. This is about 1.3% of global electricity use, about the same amount of electricity that data centers use today. This means that energy is a large and growing share of network operator costs. So energy efficiency and renewable energy are absolutely key and business imperatives for the sector. Renewable energy is not only essential to meet climate targets, but also makes a lot of business sense. We see electricity from renewables, solar, wind, being cheaper in many markets around the world than fossil fuels, and this gap is only increasing over time. Long-term contracts for renewables also reduces risks, as we saw with the volatility of energy prices over the past few years. In this chart, you can see that 1/3 of purchased electricity of operators came from renewable energy in 2022. A remarkable increase. This is about 50 terawatt hours of electricity. It's about the energy consumption of a country like Qatar or Singapore. And we can see on the right, a number of leading operators in Europe have achieved 100% renewables. And you can see European operators certainly dominating this list. So far, we've just talked about so-called operational emissions, the operators' scope 1 and 2 emissions, as we call it. But actually, 3/4 of the overall emissions come from the industry supply chain and customers, so-called scope 3 emissions. And circularity is an absolutely key strategy to reduce and address and reduce these emissions. So these are emissions from manufacturing network equipment, manufacturing mobile phones, and of course the use of those products by customers. As I said, the supply chain emissions are about 3 times larger than the operator's own emissions, so achieving these science-based targets, which includes all those emissions as well, absolutely requires aggressive reductions in scope 3 emissions. Just a few factoids on scope 3 emissions. 80% of emissions from mobile phones come from manufacturing, so extending the lifetime of a mobile phone has enormous benefits for reducing the environmental impact of phones. This means we need more repairable phones, phones that have longer software support. And we've seen, encouragingly, some of the flagship phones announced recently from the biggest manufacturers with 6 or more years of software supports. Used and refurbished phones have a much lower carbon footprint than new phones, about 90% lower for refurbished phones. And we're starting to see strong interest from customers in certain markets, especially in Europe. In fact, we see refurb sales in 2023 were up 10% compared with a 3.5% reduction in new phones. So it's certainly a growing market and a huge opportunity for the sector. Finally, we see newer phones, also newer generation phones, having much lower carbon footprint. So comparing the iPhone 15, the most recent one, versus the iPhone 6, which came out in 2014, we see these phones having a 40% lower carbon footprint thanks to renewable energy, recycled materials, and all those initiatives as well. Last year, the GSMA and leading operators around the world announced 2 new circularity targets, both to increase take-back of mobile phones, so increase the return of phones so that they can be refurbished, reused, or properly recycled, and then a commitment for 0 waste by 2030, so no used phones going to landfill and incineration. We're happy to report that 15 operators have now signed up for these circularity targets, representing about 1 billion mobile connections. As part of this work, we did some analysis and estimated that there are about over 5 billion dormant phones. You can see some numbers on the right there. These contain, valuable minerals like cobalt, gold, copper, rare earth elements, and certainly a huge opportunity and value in these minerals to either get these phones back and have a second or third life to avoid the manufacturing of a new phone, or to recycle this very valuable mineral content so that we can recycle them back into the sector. Just as a reference point, the 50,000 tons of cobalt that these 5 billion phones contain could help make 10 million electric car batteries. So quite an opportunity to help accelerate the energy transition more generally. And back to the title of the session, which is around the competitive advantage of climate action. There's just many, as I've highlighted already, many business reasons, not just the environmental reasons, to pursue climate action. For example, if you think about energy efficiency and renewable energy, these are very practical ways to reduce costs, increase energy security, increase energy reliability. On-site solar and batteries, really important in regions that have poor grid access, for example, in Africa, where operators are quite heavily reliant on diesel generators and prone to the fluctuations of fuel prices. Reuse, repair, and refurbishment offer promising revenue streams as well for operators, and also can help to kind of more broadly enhance supply chain resilience for these minerals that are quite rare, especially in Europe and North America. Green digital services can also help other industries reduce emissions and also offer promising revenue opportunities for the sector. So I encourage you to all download the report. There's both a web report that you can browse and a full PDF with all the key findings, all the numbers, plenty of charts. And I just wanted to flag this toolkit that we've also produced. It's a step-by-step guide for operators to help accelerate climate action across the industry, learn best practices, share lessons learned, and hopefully get us further on track for our near-term and long-term goals. I'll leave it there, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, George. Really comprehensive overview of a huge amount of analysis and research that we put into this Mobile Net Zero report every year to really try and understand much more clearly what is happening on climate action across the sector. And you can see actually it's not just climate that we're looking at as well, looking at broader environmental impacts, particularly around the circular economy. I think that the stat or the factoid around the 10 million electric vehicle batteries in those 5 billion phones that are just sitting in all of our cupboards and drawers is really quite striking, the level of value that is potentially sitting out there that could be collected in. Now I'd love to welcome up to the stage, I would say the stage, to a seat. Hans Neff, please take a seat. Thank you very much. So Hans Neff is Senior Director of CTO Group at ZTE.
Let's see.
So Hans, I wanted to have a chat with you because, well, firstly, congratulations are in order, because ZTE have achieved something that only 2% of companies achieve, which is you got an A for your climate reporting just this last year. And I think we saw some stats from George there around how well mobile network operators have been doing on this as well. What is it that ZTE gets out? I mean, it's quite a detailed set of questions that you have to respond to as part of the CDP questionnaire. What does ZTE get out of this process, would you say?
More than you generally think, to be honest. So we have invested in sustainability and we have invested in efficiency starting 2010s around and have tried to improve internal processes, internal services. And honestly speaking, a remarkable result was the rating of A out of 21,000 evaluated companies, being one of the 350. It's more than an honor, and we're very, very proud to get this. Now, what you can do with this, or what we get out of this, for sure, it increases the reputation of the company. So we would say this is not one of the intentions to do, so it helps to be seen, it helps to be seen in the light what we investing into our R&D, into our shipments, into our supply chain. It gives us a marketing platform. That's very frank. So it allows us to say, yes, we have achieved over years and years of optimization really a benefit and could contribute to something and are seen as an, let's say, class A company in this rating. Despite this fact, to be honest, it's a very, very detailed questionnaire. And it has a benefit, it is so detailed. Yes, it's effort to fill, don't get me wrong, but you can see what you can improve, what specific aspect you are still either not seeing or not doing well enough to get out of this some values. And it's always a competitive game too, so you want to see where is your competition in, where are they placed in, and where you can leapfrog, then I wouldn't say, but let's say be a little bit better than what the others would provide on the market. So this is the main value we see in it, to be frank.
Yeah, thank you very much. The second thing I want to say is also another round of congratulations, because last year ZTE committed to a science-based carbon reduction target, which is, as I mentioned earlier, we're not just focused on kind of long-term net zero targets, but we want to also focus on the more near-term carbon reductions that we need to hit by 2030 if we're to limit global heating. So I wanted to understand, because there are not that many large Chinese technology companies that have actually done this. So could you tell us a little bit about your motivations for taking this quite big step, and also some of the benefits you see of doing it?
I will try to. Basically, we know there are multiple initiatives running. 2050 is one of them, and as you said, we committed there to be part of the Net Zero 2050 strategy. The main intention, I think, and this is a very, very human one, don't get me wrong, it's not green bashing here, so it's really to say we are all on the same planet. We are working on functionalities in the game to make our products more efficient. And out of this more efficiency, part of the side effect is being more sustainable. So this is just out of the better chipsets you go in, out of the better products you go in, out of the software increasements you go in. So it helps you, number one, to be more efficient. It's a side effect. The second side effect is you have the chance to make your production, in a certain case, more profitable by reusing goods. So we discovered, honestly speaking, and we have there a CPE series, which is out of 94% refurbished goods produced. We have their terminal series, which are reusing reproductive goods. We are having packaging out of paper, basically, even it sounds stupid, eatable ink and other things, which help you basically to have in the shipment, in the process, in the categorization, to the end customer, and in our products, those values. And we wanted, honestly speaking, to contribute to those net zero games, because it's, I think, for every company important to finally help and contribute to the values of the market and of the green energy.
Yeah, thanks very much. And it's something that you seem to be progressing against already. I was noting that last year I think you reported on a 7% reduction in carbon emissions, but you had increased revenue, I think, at the same time. So that's the sweet spot, isn't it, really, for this decoupling of carbon emissions and revenue growth? How were you able to achieve that last year, and will you be doing the same this year?
I hope we will be doing the same. So let's see, I hope the result is even better this year. Let's start on that one. We are very proud. So we are not doing this for the first time. So if we take a little bit of look back, historically, we had basically, in average, about 6 to 7% carbon reduction every year. We were now, with last year, with 7.48%, which is for us a remarkable aim. And we still had a 2-digit revenue growth in the game. This together fits partly also because I think in the whole design process of a product already involved to have a sustainability from your first sketch, what the product should do, to the design, to the final testing, production, delivery set, designing your supply chain sustainability from start to the end, trying to have as much reusable materials, as much materials in planning in the set, and having as efficient processing and efficient products in your products is the aim of the game. And I don't want to make marketing, but you're welcome on the booth. You will see their 5 nanometer chipsets. You will see their green CPEs, which are out of refurbished materials. You will see power amplifiers, which help you power reduction of about 12 to 15%. We have a methanol fuel cell there, which is green energy generation. We have solar units there, which we use. They're basically on autark sites. So this all are opening up new business markets, which were not there before, and allowing you to have their selling objects, which are differentiating you from others in the same pool. So it's, number one, more efficiency on us. Number two, yes, we have new products and can resell them. And number three, our whole design and production process, selling, shipment process, delivery process, is in a sustainable manner. And we still have to learn, don't get me wrong. So we hope to continue the next years even better. I'm not able to promise it, but I think a 7% should be in for next year too. Let's see.
That's great to hear. We'll be watching. It's great to hear you also leaning into the clean tech opportunities as well, and hearing about that. I was also going to ask, because there's been quite a lot of pressure, I would say, coming from the network operators on the supply chain, because I think we talked there around the fact that there are 70 mobile network operators around the world now that have committed to these science-based targets. And you know, a big part of their emissions is scope 3, which is supply chain. So I know that they have been, you know, applying a bit of pressure maybe on suppliers to commit. And I know that it's not necessarily always the most straightforward, because a lot of the suppliers are in China. China has a net zero by 2060 ambition, not 2050. So do you see that as a challenge for ZTE, for your operations, for your manufacturing, etc.? Because you're saying going a little bit ahead of actually what's happening with the Chinese economy.
Let's start on a little bit historical, let's say, positioning. 2019 we had the net zero approach 2050. 2021 there was the net zero approach 2060 on the Chinese government announcement. We have to see a little bit what happened after this 2021 announcement. China raised in year 2022 160,000 patents for green energy. In the year 2023, a little bit more, whatever. All those patents go into the game to say, let's make things, products, supply chains more sustainable end to end. With the aspect here, in addition, to say it, sustainability alone is a very good thing, but it has to be affordable. It just becomes commodity, or it just will become commodity, if it is accepted by the people, if it is affordable by the people to be bought, if it can be mass used. And this combination itself, and here I say it's not a contradiction, it's, I think, a fruitful add-on, that you have there industries which, like the telecom industry, have 70 participants really enforcing a net zero by 2050 with really set games to 2030 and say, there I want to achieve that. So it helps us by giving high aims and high games, putting, yes, pressure on us, but we have learned pressure makes sometimes the best ideas, to put in like those efficiency wins I mentioned before on power amplifiers, on energy shifting, on green production of energy and others, and also software functionality. So it is a fruitful combination of both, which helps basically vendors to go into a direction, opening new markets and improving their existing business end to end. Also level 3.
Thank you so much. I'm being given a nod that our time is up, but I want to say, please put your hands together and thank Hans for joining us. So our next session is a panel discussion. I'd like to introduce Fiona Mahag-Bravo, who is a partner at Brunswick, who will be moderating our panel discussion. Fiona.
Thank you. Thanks. I'd like to invite my fellow panelists to sit, if you like. So thank you for that. So as George has said, the telecom industry has come a long way, I think, in its actions on climate change, and with clear commitments and many achieving top grades with the CDP. But challenges, I think, remain, as George also pointed out. Traffic is increasing every year, and I think the industry is going to have to manage its emissions very skillfully and also help its customers and suppliers reduce theirs. So we have a really diverse panel today to talk about some of the progress that has been made and challenges that remain, and why this is actually a competitive advantage, as the title of the session suggests. So with me today, we've got Monique Lempers, who's the Chief Impact Officer and member of the management team at Fairphone, which is an Amsterdam-based electronics company that makes sustainable handsets. We've got Exadaktylos, who's the head of, thank you, I did practice, who's the head of the network architecture specifications and energy performance at Vodafone Group. And then we have Andy Chong, who's the Group Chief Corporate Officer at Axiata, which is the multinational company, telecom company that's based in Malaysia. So thank you for being here today. And maybe Andy, since you're at the end, I can start with you. Axiata has taken a progressive approach to sustainability and climate action, and with a clear roadmap that you've set out. How difficult was it to get the internal sign-off to get that roadmap?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona, and thank you for having me on the panel. If I can just take a minute to kind of set the context a little bit where Axiata is operating, and you then can better relate to what I'm saying. Axiata, yes, is located in Malaysia, but we operate in Southeast Asia and South Asian markets. Now, I want to highlight that point because in these markets, what we term frontier markets like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Pakistan, Indonesia, there are different challenges in terms of the climate agenda. Yeah. So that aside, if you look at our purpose, right from the inception of Axiata back in 2008, our purpose was advancing Asia. Not because we knew we had to do climate agenda, but we knew we were going to operate in these very difficult markets, and they would require all the help. And as a responsible company, we are compelled to do what's necessary to uplift the economic situation of this country. So we actually embarked on a journey, a climate agenda journey, sometime in 2020. It's a little bit late in the game, but by 2021 November, we've got board approvals and signed a commitment to SBTI climate agenda. And since then, we have been progressively and in fact quite aggressively work with our operating companies to get them on board. Now, it wasn't difficult to get them to sign up to it. The question was more about how we're going to get there collectively. I think that's what we need to answer, because as a group holding company, we don't necessarily prescribe actions or prescribe or top-down approach. So we kind of pull that action from the operating companies, and hopefully we all get on the same roadmap and get ahead in that perspective. I'll keep it short there for now.
Thank you. And thanks for giving us that background also on Axiata. So Monique, maybe I can turn to you. I mean, maybe not everyone knows this, but actually Fairphone started off, you had an unusual origin story. You started off as actually a campaign to get, to improve the ethical and environmental impact of mobile phones. So can you tell us some of the issues that you were trying to address and how you launched as a company?
Yes, more than happy to. And it is actually quite a typical story, because we didn't start as a company. We started as an awareness-raising campaign. That was in 2010. And back then, the campaigners really wanted to raise awareness on the fact that there are conflict minerals in a phone, right? That contribute to conflict in a country like the DRC. And that end up in that phone that you use every day. After a few years, we, back then the founders of Fairphone, wanted to not only raise awareness, but also show that things can be done differently, and that we can actually get those materials in an ethical way from sources that are not contributing to conflict, from sources that where people work under good working conditions and are protected. And we also realized that we really have some big challenges in this industry that we need to face, confront, and bring solutions to. And that is what we wanted to do with really bringing a phone to the market, bringing devices to the market that provide scalable solutions to this. And therefore, next to the whole ethical part, the people part, which is still core to our mission, we also address one of the biggest challenges we're facing in this industry, and that is that e-waste, electronic waste, is the fastest growing waste stream worldwide. So we're selling 1.5 billion phones a year, or putting that on the market. And we're creating 50 million tons of waste every year. Because devices like smartphone are used way too short. The product life cycles are way too short. It's only, on average, used 3 years. And that is in essence also because the business model, the traditional business model that we are still working with, drives for short product life cycles, because the more products we sell, the more revenue we generate. And I think if we really want to do something about these big challenges that we have, so the e-waste, but also the climate change that is directly connected to that, we need to think carefully and go back to the drawing table to rethink our business model. Yeah.
We'll get back to the circularity and phones in a little bit later. But so, Kyri, as George said, the European telecom operators are generally seen as ahead of the game and been getting great scores on CDP, and Vodafone's no exception. You've had a lot of ambitious climate goals in recent years. So, the one question is, what action that you take has had the most impact, or what are you most proud of in terms of what Vodafone has done, and how did you achieve it?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, let me say we are really proud that we have our targets validated by science-based targets. As we saw in the graph, we are one of these operators. For our own emissions, Scope 1 and Scope 2, we want to be net zero by 2030, and for our full scope of emissions, including Scope 3 by 2040, which is very, very ambitious. Mm-hmm. This is where we need collaboration with our suppliers to get that achieved, plus all the initiatives that you already mentioned about circularity. Things that makes us proud so far, what we have achieved on the journey of that, is the 100% renewable electricity in Europe. I think that was a great achievement and gave internal pride to the company and the employees to become climate aware as well. So it's not only external and reputation and branding, but I think it's internal pride of the people. We have also done new purchasing agreements in markets where this was not possible before. So, for example, in Egypt, if I can mention, there was an agreement between the Ministry of Energy and renewables with a new renewable agency there. That was agreed in COP22, and now we were able to start implementing that. This is one of the markets that was not possible. So that means for any energy use we have on the network, we are able to match electricity coming from renewable sources. And another area, if I can mention as well, is the best practice on energy management for the ISO 50001 standard and certification, which we have achieved that for whole Europe and Egypt. And now we're working for the remaining markets in Africa. So I think these are two big highlights that makes us proud. But I will mention more later.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we will get to them. Andy, so I want to come back to what you were saying about just the variety of countries that you're in. And I think some of the countries you operate in, such as Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or Cambodia, are in many ways on the front lines of climate change and highly affected by it. So my question is, how has this, I suppose maybe personally, influenced the way you think about climate change operating in these countries?
In fact, I did spend 6 years in Nepal as well, and we have just recently divested that operations. But that kind of highlights that, for me personally, in those countries, you see that I wouldn't necessarily say climate-affected impacts, but basically impacts like floods, droughts, earthquakes, famine, etc. is just very pronounced. And that kind of drives an urgency, I guess, personally for me when I come back here at the corporate center to want to do things, for this, at least for our business, and in return, hopefully support the country in the right ways. Now, if you look at these markets, renewables, access to renewables are almost non-existent. The current mix of energy consumption with renewables is as low as 2% or 4% in some of these countries. So, to get them up the curve is just going to be a long journey, right? It's going to require a lot of advocacy with governments and stakeholders to put policies in place to have them adopt new ways of doing things and so on and so forth. But keep in mind, though, a lot of these countries still have a tremendous amount of priorities based on the SDG goals that we all have. We do support many of those SDG goals, but in some of these countries, it's not necessarily driven by climate agenda from that perspective.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Monique, you're not a huge mobile phone manufacturer, but you are growing, and your company received, I think, an investment of 15 million euros What is the company going to spend that on, and how is that going to help your sustainability goals?
Well, for us, our biggest next step is to really grow our market footprint. So I think we've, over the last 10 years, have achieved to really set the bar when it comes to sustainability and circularity. I can, with quite some confidence, claim that the latest phone we brought to the market in September last year, the Fairphone 5, is the most sustainable and circular phone on the market. We also, you saw that some software support is now increasing to 7 years. We have 8 years software support with our phone, up to 10 years, which is our aim. And we also have 5-year warranty. It is repairable. It is.
Is the idea that it can be self-repaired? Is that
you can very easily self-repair it. It has 11 modules, including, especially, of course, the battery is very easy to take out and to replace. Put in a new battery, and you actually would be surprised how many people still swap their phone for a new phone because, it is slowing down because of the battery is not giving its full function anymore, and that happens with every battery after 2 years. And there are many of those kind of examples where it's not necessary to buy new hardware, because you can either replace it or repair it, or ensure that software is updated. But so we've raised the bar, and now our next step is really to I think we've been practicing too much to the choir so far, or a lot, and now we need to go to the mass market. And with the phone we launched, we have a device that has the quality level and has the specs that is accessible, that makes it accessible to the mass.
Fairphone has a stand that I saw. You can check the phone out.
Hall 4
there.
Dutch Pavilion.
So Kyri, you have come a long way and done quite a bit at Vodafone, and some say it could be the sort of low-hanging fruit that's been harvested already in terms of reducing carbon emissions. What keeps you up at night in terms of thinking about what's next and what you still have to do?
There are a lot of challenges. If I have to stay on 3 or 4, first is the increase of traffic. We saw it before. That keeps growing around 35% year on year, and it might have 6-fold increase by 2030. And to be efficient in our operations, and we need to have our energy consumption broadly flat, which is a huge challenge. So how you achieve that is all the initiatives of energy efficiency, improve on energy efficiency from network equipment, bring digitalization, AI algorithms, and that will help us be more efficient and then keep the consumption broadly flat. That's one challenge. Another one is in Africa. As you know, we have many operations in Africa, in several countries, and then the challenge there is the lack of grid. There is not everywhere, or it's not very reliable, so you need to have dependency on diesel, and diesel is a challenge. Now, there are technologies which we are looking as alternative to diesel, but they are not mature yet. There are operational challenges. For example, sometimes you don't find maintenance suppliers for the fuel, or you don't have the alternative fuel in the country and you have to import it. And I think these technologies will become more mature, but are not there yet. And the third one is switch off of all technologies. So we have switched off 3G. Now you would say, why you didn't switch off 2G first, right? This would make logic. 2G like more than 25 years now. But there are many challenges there. There are millions of smart meters in many utility companies and other companies which are 2G smart meters, and they are not replaced. It will take time. Emergency call on vehicles, that's not the next generation, which is not 2G based, is not yet available. 4G coverage at the same level as 2G. So we are trying to resolve all these challenges and switch off 3G in the next coming years by 2030, so that we are able to have the most efficient technology like 5G and be more efficient. And the fourth one is the renewables area. So the renewables area, the return of investment, how we can make it down to 2-3 years instead of 5 or 6. for new storage solutions or solar panels, how we can improve the efficiency of solar. So I had some meetings with some of our suppliers these days, and they're saying by 2030 we could see higher efficiency of solar panel going to 32% from 22%, which is today. So these are all encouraging things which will help us to improve the return of investment and have more deployment across our base stations.
Thank you. Maybe we can talk a bit about collaboration, which seems to be another theme at the Mobile World Congress beyond AI and regulation, which are two other themes. Andy, climate action seems to benefit from a sort of collaborative approach, with companies saying how they welcome cross-industry collaboration. I guess we could call you a group of companies, really. So the question is, how do you find it working with the operating company? You mentioned that a bit before, but maybe you can give a bit more detail about what it's like to get the operating companies to adhere to your goals.
Yeah, sure. That's a good point. I think for a lot of things that we do as a group company, be it climate agenda or just all the different strategic initiatives, we need to govern it in the right way. So what we've done is set up board committees, not just at the group level, but also at the operating company levels, which has the mandate to have insights and govern the entire process, but based on top-down KPIs, obviously. Now we are waiting for our SBTI validation, which should happen sometime mid-March. And those targets were actually done on the baseline that was collected bottoms up. Yeah, so, there is already buy-in from the operating companies. We are kind of a soft touch in terms of how we work with them, like many other companies, group companies. And therefore, the best way to govern the entire process is based on board committees and governance structure that allows almost a self-disciplined action based on agreed roadmaps. We have three drivers. One is decarbonizing our network operations, like what Kyriakos has said, in terms of being more efficient or switching to renewables. Two, we have to accelerate our carbon, what's the word? I lost the word. Just accelerate the whole carbon reduction process. And then three, which is the biggest one, is actually we need to transform our value chain. If you don't know, Scope 3 for us accounts for about 64% of emissions. 1 and 2 is about 2% and 33%. So you can see where the biggest lever is. 90%. 90%. So what Hans is doing from ZT is an essential part of our exercise to get to where we need to get to.
Okay. I'm told we're nearing time, but I actually have a couple of questions I'd like to ask all of you, so maybe we can do a rapid fire if possible, which is, if there's one thing that you could ask regulators that to somehow help you in this fight to reduce emissions, what would it be? Monique, do you want to go first?
I think it is important that we get the eco-design directive adopted as soon as possible, because that's still for adoption. And in that includes also good regulation on the need for products to be repairable, to have spare parts available, and to have software updates for 5 years at least after the last sale of product. So I think that is quite critical. So I would like to urge them to do that ASAP before the elections.
Before the elections, okay, that are coming up. Kyri, what's on your wish list?
Again, I will talk differently Europe and Africa. I think the regulatory and policy support is different stage. In Europe, I would say we need implementation of policy like Repower EU, and have also funding support for renewables, whether that is solar, wind, but also digital power solutions to enable smart grid, demand response solutions, which can help us either reduce our consumption in a more intelligent way or have new revenue. And then I have to mention also to the OTT fair share topic, which is a wide industry.
This is rapid
topic.
fire, though. Rapid fire.
I know. But at the end,
sum it up in 10 seconds.
If there cannot be fair share, I think at least needs to be responsibility on how we deliver content, how we consume content, right? So there is now technologies with AI where you can have adaptive, aware traffic content delivery based on real-time network conditions, and then you can be not so impactful on the consumption you have on the network. And then finally for Africa, I think the grid is the biggest challenge. So we need government support to improve the grid availability and grid reliability, and also the framework for purchasing renewables and certificates and PPAs. So all of that needs to be evolved in Africa.
Okay. Andy?
Yeah, frameworks and policies that drive call to action, because right now it's all about disclosures and reporting.
Okay. Thank you for that short response. My final question is back to the point of this panel, which is why is doing this a competitive advantage? And so, Monique, maybe we can start with you. How do you see this helping you, not just a risk or a burden, but something that's helping you?
Well, because the demand is growing, and that is simply because we're all faced with the big challenge we have, and we need to do something about that. And more people know that through their buying power, they can make a difference. That is also why our slogan is "Changes in your hands."
Okay, and if you fast forward 30 years, to 2030, sorry, how will this have helped Vodafone to achieve all these targets?
I think the job and the challenge doesn't stop when you meet the targets. You need to continue be more energy efficient for the years to come and the decades to come. 6G will come, for sure will be more efficient than 5G, but we need to be able to be efficient in our operations, and both from the emission reduction, but also on how we consume energy. And I think the intelligence which is coming in now with the AI will expand to any part of the network domain, from RAN to core, virtualization, to the algorithms of network planning, and all of that will help us be even more efficient for the next decades.
Andy, what's your competitive advantage?
Yeah, for me, I like to believe that we would be, by 2030, be a lot more efficient in terms of energy intensity, and also more efficient in terms of delivering goods and services. So I like to believe that by 2030 will be that. And that will give us a competitive advantage. I think if you think about sustainability as a kind of short-term exercise, it's going to look like a cost driver, right? That's without doubt, because we have those discussions with our operating companies. We're not going to do solar, we're not going to do this and that because it's a cost driver. But I think if you fast forward and see it as an investment in the near and longer term, I think it will translate to efficiency across the business over time, and hence it must translate to a competitive advantage. And in our board discussion, actually, one point that I should highlight is the board did also highlight that the cost of non-action today is going to be worse. Is going to be a far worse if going forward to mitigate if you don't take action now. I think that's the reality.
Okay, great. I don't know do we have time for. So I'd like to open it up to see if anyone actually has any questions in the audience that they'd like to ask our distinguished panelists. Sure. Do you need you probably don't need a microphone.
I don't know, it's a small room.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a shame, right? Given that we're at a conference of 95,000. This feels more important than a room full of 50 people. Sorry, I'm Quinton from Square Trade, so I head up our sustainability practice there. How do you see us kind of tackling the challenge of moving climate action and targets from what often feels like a compliance exercise in terms of measuring targets, etc., and actually putting it into strategy and making it the heart of innovation?
Yeah, I can take that because we have those discussions, at the corporate level, right? Is it just a reporting exercise? And I stated earlier that today, in all our businesses where we have a listed company, there are reporting requirements, and that's all it is. You just report, and it kind of sits there, but nothing happens beyond that. So, from my perspective, certainly the way we drive it is, we said reporting is a means to an end, and what we need to do is to drive those actions, because we know it will translate to a more efficient business for us going forward. It's not about just getting some numbers right and so on. Yes, you need to do those disclosures, because if you don't do the disclosures, your investors are going to look at your numbers and make some assumptions about what you are not doing. And that becomes, you know, a non-positive for you, correct? So, you know, that's how we think about that, really.
If I can complement to
Yes,
that
please.
question, I think the emissions is one part, right? The consumption is the other bit. So from technology, we have technology objectives to improve energy efficiency and reduce the consumption year on year, and that is embedded to everything we are doing on year by year, and that's regardless of meeting net zero 2028 or 2030 or 2040. And outside technology, also in relationship with our suppliers, any procurement process we are doing to select suppliers, we have energy efficiency requirements. We asked our suppliers to be aligning as much as possible with our journey on net zero target. We are running now the biggest tender in the industry on the radio access network, 170,000 sites, and we have invited 25 suppliers. Majority are open RAN suppliers, but yeah, we ask responsibility, because this is not just from us. It needs to come from all the partners together.
Thank you. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. So I wanted to thank Monique and Kyri and Andy for joining us and telling us about your experience. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Fiona, and thanks to our panelists here. Thanks, Monique. Thank you, Andy, and thanks, Kyri. Just to wrap up by saying there is a huge amount actually going on climate action across the mobile sector. You just might not have heard about it, but there is a lot. So if you scan this QR code, you can find out about a lot of it. If you go on gsma.com/climate, there's a huge amount of information, all sorts of different action that's happening. Mobile network operators, the supply chain, carbon emissions, circularity. Please do check it out, and you can also look at the Mobile Net Zero Report 24 that we've just released. We'll be giving an update every year until we get to net zero. Thank you very much.